Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Mark Carney will be the next Prime Minister of Canada after his Liberal Party staged a stunning election comeback. The Conservatives had held a 20-point lead in the polls at the start of the year, while their leader Pierre Poilievre has lost his seat. On Trump's 100th day in office, the White House has hailed the president's second term as the most historic start in American history. Meanwhile, Trump has disputed polls that suggest his popularity ratings have plunged. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called a 3-day ceasefire proposal by Russian leader Vladimir Putin manipulation, calling for a full end to the war. European leaders have called for pressure on Russia as deadly strikes are reported by both sides. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has chaired a meeting with security heads as tensions with Pakistan continue to escalate. This comes a week on from the deadly terror attack in Kashmir that killed 26 people. A restaurant fire in northeastern China has killed 22 people, according to Chinese media outlet Xinhua. Footage of the devastating blaze has been circulating on social media as President Xi calls it a deeply sobering lesson. An ongoing UN court hearing on the Gaza war has been boycotted by Israel, with aid blockages and military action under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Egypt pushes for further ceasefire talks as families of Israeli hostages urge global action over the ongoing impasse. Meanwhile, Shin Bet head Ronan Bar has announced he will step down on June the 15th, saying he wants to allow a professional handover after 35 years of service. His resignation comes 6 weeks after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered his removal. Portugal says all 6.4 million electricity clients now have power after Monday's blackout, while Spain reports most services have been restored amid ongoing traffic and telecoms disruption. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says the cause remains unknown and urges against speculation. Starting off this hour, a new chapter begins in Canadian politics as Mark Carney leads the Liberal Party to victory in the 2025 federal election. The results are in. The Liberals have won 168 of 343 seats, putting them ahead of the Conservatives, who secured 144 seats in a tightly contested race. This election saw voters abandoning smaller parties in significant numbers. In fact, the NDP saw its influence shrink, while the Green Party's national support dropped by half, from 2% to just 1%. Voters mostly rallied around the Liberals and Conservatives, making this one of the most two-party dominated elections in recent Canadian history. Now, with the election behind him, Prime Minister Mark Carney has outlined a bold 5-point agenda which majorly includes Canada's housing crisis, tax cuts for low-income Canadians, a boost to defence spending, a major industrial push, and he also aims to position Canada as an energy powerhouse. Well, joining us to discuss the fallout from this historic Canadian election is Eric Wahlberg, a political analyst who's joining us from Toronto. Eric, thank you very much for being here with us. We spoke to you prior to the results coming out. Now that we know that the Liberals have won, what is your reaction to the election?
Nothing special, really. It was just like the last election. Trudeau called it early and ended up with a minority government. So here's Carney calling the election again early and getting another minority government. Although this time he's in worse shape because his ally, the NDP, the Socialist Party that works with the Liberals traditionally in minority governments, it was cut in half. So it's not even an official opposition party now. It's only got 7 seats. It needed 12 to pass the threshold and become the official. Not this. It wouldn't be the official opposition because the Bloc Québécois has its solid 23 seats, but the NDP. The Bloc Québécois doesn't really work with the Liberals very much. It doesn't really like that. So it's better to have the NDP. So it looks like Carney may have to try and pull a rabbit out of the hat and make the NDP an official opposition party so that it can get on the subcommittees and that it won't be able to, the Conservatives won't be able to derail the Liberals' agenda, which is better than the Conservative. I'll admit that. Carney is a banker, so he's not really a populist or a people's man. He's more part of the global elite, the financial elite. So that really puts him at a disadvantage through all of this because he's facing Trump and has to be not a globalist anymore, but has to be a Canadian and concerned about the Canadian economy. But he has a program with to try and revive Canada's industry as much as that's possible, given China's control really over world consumerism. But he is doing that, and he will be able to deal with Trump. So it's better than Trudeau. Trudeau is not at all popular with Trump. Trump respects, I think, Carney at least.
Eric, I'd like to come in. We are, of course, shorter on time. But I want to look at Pierre Poilievre, who's not just lost this election that looked at the tip of his fingers just months ago, but he's also lost his seat. What next for this Conservative rising star?
Well, they'll give him a riding somewhere. The Conservatives will just take someone will resign, and he will be parachuted in so that he can be in the parliament. So that's not really a problem. And the fact that he lost his riding, well, he's from the West. But he chose a riding in Ottawa, and Ottawa is solidly liberal. That was a very foolish a political move. That just shows you that he's not really a savvy politician, that he's got a big mouth and he likes to throw things out like Trump, but he will do something. He will have this gap of like the embarrassment of losing his seat. So it's not a really serious problem. The Conservatives will deal with it. He is a strong. The Conservatives support him. He's got good backing, so that's not really an issue. I think that, but his agenda is Trumpian, and it's not. There's no environmental consideration really. He's big on oil sands and really horrible environmental issues. So I'm glad that he's not the new leader.
Eric, to bring an end to this discussion, I want to divide my final question into two parts. What is Mark Carney going to face as the most challenging aspect inside of Canada, and then how is he going to tackle Donald Trump?
Well, it's very polarized. It's now almost like a two-party system again, with the third party, the NDP, really cut out of this. Unless Carney, so I would urge Carney to try and fiddle the electoral, not the results, but to allow the NDP to have its opposition status, because he's going to have to work. He can't just keep calling elections. We've had two, and they're hugely expensive, these elections. So you have to deal with what you've got. So he's got to, that would be a good step, but also just pursue his economic policy and hope that he can do this in the face of Trump. That's really all we can hope. Just sit back and watch him. But also on foreign policy issues, he's he's not going to rock the boat. He's going to be pro-Ukraine, vaguely pro-Israel, not too much, because that's really disgusting to be really pro-Israel now. But he will leave them in peace. So really, nothing has changed with this election. It was another expensive election with we need is proportional representation. Then we wouldn't have this ridiculous situation where a large part of the people are just shut out from the election. So,
Eric, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your insight. Now we know who the Prime Minister of Canada will be for the coming years. We wait to see how he reacts to Trump, to foreign policy and also Canadian issues. We will, of course, will bring you all of those updates here on NewsX World. Speaking of Trump, the US President has marked his first 100 days back in office with a surge of executive actions. These include 3 major orders announced on Monday. First, a renewed crackdown on sanctuary cities. Federal officials are now directed to list jurisdictions resisting immigration enforcement and to identify funding that can be cut, even as courts have ruled against such moves. Second, support for law enforcement. The Attorney General will provide legal aid to officers facing lawsuits over actions taken on duty, while also holding local officials accountable for obstructing criminal law enforcement. Third, a nationwide English requirement. Commercial drivers, including truckers, must now read and speak English, aimed at boosting safety and communication on US roads. According to the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, these latest actions bring Trump's total to over 140 executive orders in just the 100 days, nearly matching the total signed by Joe Biden during his entire 4-year term. Well, joining us to discuss these executive orders on Trump's 100th day in office is Scott Faulkner, head of the Eagle Enterprises, a security firm based in Washington. Scott also joining us from Washington as well. Scott, thank you for being here with us today. I want to touch on that last point that I made. 140 executive orders in 100 days, nearly matching the Biden total from his full term. What does that say about Trump's goals and aims during his second term as the US president?
Well, Trump definitely learned a lot of lessons from the first term, where he started slow. He did not clear out the House in terms of all the appointees. He did not appoint that many people. This time around, he is moving with lightning speed. Some would say, probably using the Iraq war analogy, shock and awe, that he has been very aggressive, because on one front he thinks he needs to roll back so much in the last 4 years just to get back to normal, let alone move forward on his own agenda. So it's a very aggressive, very widespread, lightning speed 100 days.
Yes, Scott, looking at these 3 new executive orders that Trump has announced and signed, I want to look first at the English-speaking aspect of this. Is this tying in at all with any of his immigration aims, or is this just a move to make sure that everybody can speak English?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I think really it's mostly everyone speaking English. If you look at the aviation industry worldwide, everyone in the cockpit and everyone in air traffic control are required to speak English, no matter if you're with Air India or Air France or Thai Air or Emirates or whatever, so that everybody is speaking the same language. And in terms of black boxes, should any incidents happen, everybody is speaking the same language. So this has been a standard for literally 50 years or more in the aviation industry, so why not do it for trucking?
Yes, Scott, moving on now to looking at listing jurisdictions that are resisting immigration enforcement. Of course, immigration is such a key point in Trump's election campaign and in his early days of this second term. What will this actually mean moving forward in terms of real life impacts?
It's about the flow of dollars that, again, the federal government provides a lot of grants to and other support to jurisdictions, counties, states, municipalities, and they always put basically add requirements that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to get your next grant. And so the same thing goes here, that sanctuary cities are basically reneging and really unconstitutionally ignoring federal law, and they should not be rewarded for that. So the Trump administration is basically saying, you do not have an inherent right to grants and aid. You have to apply for these, and we can add this additional criteria that if you're basically ignoring federal law, we are not going to give you the money you're asking for.
Yes, Scott, and I want to look at this third and final executive order that's been announced in the past 24 hours, looking at providing legal aid to officers and law enforcement who are facing lawsuits, but also holding local officials accountable for obstructing criminal law enforcement. What is the motive behind this move?
I think that over the last several years under Biden, Americans saw how people were being abused, Jewish students being stopped from going onto campuses to go about their own academic business, vandalism and other activities happening, and local jurisdictions either refusing to arrest, or once they've arrested, it's sort of like catch and release. And so this holding people accountable again to the rule of law, that if laws are broken, people should be arrested. If laws are broken, people should be prosecuted. And some of these left-wing activist groups trying to freeze police activity and other law enforcement by doing civil suits, this not only levels the playing field, it basically brings the playing field back to the rule of law.
Yes, Scott, we do have a special programme in just under an hour where we will be assessing Trump's first 100 days in office during his second term. But I'd like your overall opinion on how successful it has been from the point of view of Trump carrying out what he said he would in his election campaign.
I think he's historic. I mean, when you look at the 100-day criteria was started under Franklin Roosevelt in 1933, in his first 100 days, where he basically established the New Deal. And then again, you look at the first 100 days of Lyndon Johnson in 1965, where he established the Great Society. That we're really looking at Trump's explosion of activity and forward movement, and basically in that kind of historical context that we're looking at. And of course, the other two were Democrat liberals. We now have a conservative Republican. So it really is historic on all fronts. I mean, I was with Reagan, and we did a lot in 100 days, but we had a much more paced first term. So Trump is really, when you look at the border, when you look at at things like the tariffs, when you look at again, not only reversal of Biden, but assertion of basically Americanism for getting rid of diversity, equity, inclusion, and things like that. That he is, and then DOGE. I mean, he is moving on an incredibly broad front. Some people might think maybe at times blunt instruments were used where more laser focus could be done. I think those are quibbles. He's trying to, if you want to use the analogy of maritime, he saw the ship of state of America heading toward breaking up on the rocks, and he's given the wheel a spin to try to put us back on course.
Scott Faulkner, thank you ever so much for joining us. As I alluded to there, at 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time, we will be diving deeper into Trump's 100 days in office during his second term. Make sure you're tuning in for that one. But we move from North America now to Europe, and investigations are now underway into the massive power outage that brought Spain and Portugal to a grinding halt on Monday. Spain's High Court has launched a formal probe to determine whether the blackout may have been caused by a cyber attack. The Spanish court says it is probing possible sabotage. This comes even as Spain's national grid operator ruled out any cyber breach, instead blaming a grid disconnection with France. Portugal, however, pointed to a voltage surge originating in Spain. Here is what the Director of Operations, Eduardo Prieto, had to say.
En primer lugar, me gustaría conocer la buena noticia de que el sistema eléctrico se encuentra en estos momentos funcionando de manera normalizada, funcionando de manera estable y correcta. Pero con los análisis que hemos podido realizar hasta este momento, podemos descartar un incidente de ciberseguridad en las instalaciones de...
Meanwhile, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said Spain lost 15 gigawatts of power in just 5 seconds. This is about 60% of the national power demand. He has spoken to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte as rumours of sabotage continue to swirl. Here is what the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has said.
Red Eléctrica ha hecho saber que descarta en la red de transportes cualquier ciberataque. Valoramos positivamente este aspecto, pero en todo caso la responsabilidad del Gobierno de España es hacer un análisis independiente de qué es lo que ha sucedido y, por tanto, también utilizar todos los mecanismos, los resortes que tiene la Administración General del Estado, el INCIBE, el Centro Criptológico Nacional, y una vez examinados esos registros de red eléctrica y de todos los operadores privados, pues no descartar ninguna hipótesis hasta que tengamos los resultados de estos análisis que, por supuesto, ya les adelanto, se harán públicos.
Well, following the power outages and the chaos that it caused, power has now returned, with 61% of Spain's electricity restored. In Portugal, 85 out of 89 substations are back online. Investigators are racing to uncover what triggered one of Europe's biggest blackouts in decades. Well, joining us to discuss this blackout and the potential cause is Marian Duris, a European affairs expert, who is joining us from Brussels. Marian, thank you very much for being here. Let's start with this probe that has been launched. Of course, a blackout of this scale, covering not just one country but two, is almost unheard of. So this probe, how seriously will it be taken, and how likely is it that it is sabotage, as has been potentially suggested by one court?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question and for having me. Yes, the probe will show us for sure more than we know right now. But I would like to say more background in this situation, because, for example, for Spanish government, it was a historic achievement that national grid was powered entirely by renewable energy, and it was not so long ago. It was on Tuesday, April 16. So wind, solar, and hydro met 100% of mainland electricity demand. But just 6 days later, on April 22, Spain and Portugal experienced one of their largest ever blackouts. The power cut also affected not only these two countries, but also parts of France, of Andorra, Belgium, and Netherlands, as the Iberian grid disconnected from the wider European network. According to some sources, very strong oscillation in the grid triggered this disconnection. Portugal's representatives blamed extreme temperature variations that disrupted high voltage power lines. So, while the cause is still under investigation, experts are raising concerns about grid stability in high renewable systems. At the time of the blackout, solar was generating, as you said, 60% of Spain's electricity. So what can be issue? Solar, wind rely on inverter-based technology, which lacks the rotating inertia of traditional coal, gas, or hydro plants. So these older systems act as shock absorbers during grid disturbances. Without them, grids become faster but more fragile. Still, So grid fragility remains a concern, especially as coal and nuclear plants continue to be phased out.
Yes, Marian, we have been showing on screen some of the impacts of these power outages, as you say, impacting mainly Spain and Portugal, but also it being felt elsewhere like France and Andorra as well. Given the disruption that this caused in the immediate term, what further impacts could this have? Almost ripple effects off the back of the travel disruption and other impacts to daily life.
Yeah, exactly. It had significant and widespread impacts across both countries. So, as we said, transport, public services, as we can see, traffic lights failed, leading to major congestion in urban areas. Emergency services were deployed to manage the situation, and the city of Madrid activated its emergency response plan. Another sector is healthcare. Hospitals switched to back up the generators to maintain critical operations. For example, telecommunications were severely affected. Government operations, key institutions including Spanish Parliament and the Madrid Stock Exchange experienced power outages, leading to the suspension of activities. And we can say about casualties, we can say about Lisbon Airport or another things like utilities, water supply services were affected. So I think this impact was absolutely monstrous and significant. What about impact on these countries? Yeah.
Yes, Marian, we have a couple of minutes left. I want to look at the response from the leaders of both Portugal and Spain. And also, I would like to touch on what might be done to future-proof any further outage like this one.
Yeah, both countries have initiated several measures to address the immediate crisis and prevent future occurrences. In case of Spain, crisis management, government activated the crisis cabinet at Electrica headquarters with Prime Minister and key ministers, of course. There is investigation, as we mentioned, case of accountability, and of course, they need some kind of public guidance, because during the critical hours of the blackout, there were some advices to citizens to minimize travel, rely solely on official information sources, and use mobile phones responsibly, etc. In case of Portugal, there was emergency meeting. Government convened an emergency cabinet, same. Grid stabilization. The Portuguese electricity distributor implemented controlled power cuts in specific areas to stabilize the network. And of course, case of infrastructure resilience. So this means backup power systems were activated in critical facilities, including hospitals, airports, to maintain essential services during the outages. So I think there is need of these coordinated efforts, which are reflecting commitment to enhancing the resilience of the peninsula power infrastructure and preventing similar incidents in the future.
Marian Duris, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight. That is all we have time for now, but make sure you're tuning in around half an hour's time for our 100 days of Trump during his second term special. We'll see you there.